How's it going, guys? Welcome back to my small engine repair channel. Today's project is one I'm kind of excited about. I picked up this Honda HS80 track-driven snowblower from my scrap guy, and he says that the previous owner said it runs but it won't drive. So let's take a look at it and see if we can't get it back in service. Alright guys, so yeah, I picked this up from my scrapper, and this thing is a beast. It was quite the deal just getting it off his truck. And I don't have very much info on it, except for the scrapper said the previous owner says it runs, but it doesn't drive. So we're going to take a quick look at it, do a preliminary here on it, and see if it's even worth going through. So we'll start off with the fuel tank here. I'm a little skeptical. Although this is a 35 probably year old machine, these metal tanks sometimes rust out on the inside there. So, all right, so it's hard to tell from the camera, but it looks pretty clean, the tank itself. I don't see a whole lot of rust. I see some rusty, grungy water in the bottom of the tank. That's that brown colored stuff right here by the filter. So definitely gonna have to clean out this tank, which is fine. It's still a usable tank, at least, thankfully. And check the oil next. Okay, it's right up to the threads, and the oil actually looks pretty good quality wise, so that's promising. All right, so let me take another quick look around this thing. I've never worked on one of these, so that's why I'm kind of pumped up about it. Looks like we have an ignition switch, a gear handle. That it does go into first gear and second gear, but not third gear. And it does go into reverse, so that's okay. Now we got the auger handle. That has some resistance. I feel some resistance there. This one being the drive, so there is some resistance there as well, so that's good. Let's see if the chute works. Chute works pretty good. All right, down here for the controls. So it looks like we got a throttle control, and we've got a choke lever and a fuel shutoff, which is in the off position, so that's a good sign as well. Air filter housing, which doesn't have air filters on these snowblowers. It looks like it's missing a wing nut here. And it looks a little, crusty, but I mean, what do you expect? It's 35 years old. So spark plug here, I'm going to take that out and take a look at it before I try and get this thing started. I'm going to pull it over with the cord and see if there's any compression. Oh, that's not good. Houston, I think we have a problem. I can't get this thing to even turn over, so pull it over. So I guess that's where we're gonna have to start with this thing, because I want to just do a quick test, throw some starting fluid in the carb, not use the fuel in the tank. Obviously, that's somewhat water. And see if this thing will fire and prove to me that I have spark and compression. But with this thing, looks like it's jammed. I don't know if it's hydrolocked or if we've got an internal problem inside the engine. So that's where we're going to take it next. Alright, so first thing I want to do is take the spark plug out, and I'll try and pull it over with the spark plug out. See if we get any movement out of the engine itself. I'm going to have to blow some leaves and crap out of there first because I don't want that going into the spark plug hole. Alright guys, so I just was blowing out the leaves out of the auger area and found my second problem here. We've got one auger that's just spinning freely, so it's obviously missing a shear pin here. And this guy's got its shear pin, so that's problem number 2, but we gotta get this thing fired up first, engine-wise, just to see if this will run. So. Seems weird, like the threads have a lot of resistance, like it's been cross-threaded or something like that. Alright, so I don't think that's metal shavings. It's hard to tell. I definitely see the spark plug. The gap is not great. I don't think that's proper. I think 27 to 31 or something for Hondas. Just right around 30 thousandths. So anyways, now that the spark plug is out, I'm going to go ahead and try and pull this thing over. And it's still stuck. So that is not a good sign. Alright, so I think what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to take a look at the belts and the pulley that comes off of the crankshaft of the engine here. I'm going to take off these bolts here, probably 10 mil. And probably this guy, I would think. And we'll start from there. And it looks like another one here. Alright guys, so the belts, they seem to be intact. There was definitely someone building a home in here at some point. And let me see here. So we've got the auger engagement pulley here. And then we've got the other one for the drive. Okay, those seem to be loose. The belts seem to be in order. But let me see, this can guarantee you this pulley's not going to turn because it's connected to the crankshaft, which is connected to the rest of the engine, and also connected to that pull cord over here, which isn't coming out. I think what I'm going to do next is take off this starter recoil. A couple of bolts on that starter recoil. I'll take this off and I might be able to put a big socket and a breaker bar on the flywheel side and see if I can get this thing to turn over. Alright, so I got the pull start off, and as you can see the pull start works just fine. So it's not the pull start jammed up, it's definitely the engine that might be jammed up here. So what I'm going to do is put a little bit of oil down in that spark plug hole, down in there, and then I'm going to get a big breaker bar and put a a socket on the end of this guy and see if I can get it to turn over at all. Alright guys, so this happens to be a 24mm socket. Oh, Jesus. It's not stuck at all now. Oh, let me see here. This might be stuck in a certain... Yeah, it's really crunchy here. Through a specific spot. And once you get it past that, it's loose. Alright, so let me see inside the cylinder roughly where we are in the cycle. I don't know if you can see in there, but it looks like the piston's pretty close to the top of the hole. So right when it gets up above about top dead center, it starts to get a little bit crusty there. And it could be just from sitting for a length of time. So I'm going to put some more oil in there and keep rotating this thing to try and make sure that it gets plenty of lubrication in there. And we'll see. I'll throw some fuel in there and we'll see if it will even try to fire up on us. Alright guys, so I got the pull start put back on. I got the spark plug reinstalled there. I just brought it outside because this thing is going to smoke if it does start at all. I kept the fuel off. I don't want any garbage water going in to the carburetor. The choke is closed, the throttle is up. I'm going to spray some starter fluid into the air intake here, which will eventually get sucked up into the carb, and see what it does. Ignition's on. Oh, promising. Wow. That is promising. Okay, so it runs and it sounds great actually. The drive went forward in first gear. It didn't move in second gear. And I didn't get a chance to try it in reverse. It seemed to run off of a little bit of fuel, whatever's in the float bowl of the carburetor, and then it just died out. So this is promising, guys. Even if I can't get all the gears to work, we'll figure out why, but because I know parts are pretty hard to get for these things. So even if I can get it to work in one gear, you know, somebody might buy it for nostalgia or whatever. So let's continue on, and we'll tackle the fuel system next. Alright, so to get at this fuel system, there's a couple of brackets. I'm going to take this bracket off. They're all, I think, 10mm bolts here. Oops. So far they're all the same, except this guy was a big guy right here. Longer one. Alright. Now to get the rest of this, I'm going to just leave that there for now. Get the rest of this air cover off. It's 2 more 10mm. I should just pull out and then up. There we go. Now we get a better look at all the linkages and stuff like that, and take a look in that carburetor right there. That's not good, but it's where the choke plate is. Okay. And this looks like quite a few linkages, so if you're going to take this carburetor completely apart, guys, make sure you take pictures of all this stuff, where all this linkage and stuff goes, so that you can put it all back on together again. So the throttle linkage is actually nice and free. The choke mechanism works just fine. All right. So I'm just going to take this bracket off. So here's the fuel line. I think I'm going to take the fuel line off, drain out all the crap out of there, and then I'm going to probably take this carburetor right off and throw it in my ultrasonic cleaner to clean it up. Get it nice and clean. Alright, so I'm going to pinch off the fuel line here. Remove the fuel line from the carburetor, and then I'm going to try and drain this out. I think I need a little bit more space there, so I'm going to undo this clamp back here for the fuel line, so I can pull it back a little bit further, and then I can drain this into my little tub down here, little ice cream container. Open the fuel cap to allow some extra air in for venting. Yeah, definitely see some water in there. Alright, so as you can see, the fuel has pretty much stopped flowing, but take a look in this tank. Still plenty of fuel in here, so. Alright, so for the tank, I see one bolt there, and on this side, looks like one here and one here. And potentially one there. Alright, let's take that, bend that bracket off. Okay, now this looks like the fuel line's gonna have to come out through here, and with this clamp on there, that's not gonna work, so I think I'm gonna remove my throttle linkage here. Alright, and that'll allow me, I think, a little bit more leeway to be able to get this fuel line past that with the clamp on it. And voila. We got this fuel tank off. Alright, now I'm just going to dump all this fuel out from the top now. And I'm gonna check the flow out of there. Once I dump most of the fuel out, I'm gonna check the flow, because there seemed to be a flow issue. So maybe that fuel filter is all clogged up. Alright, so got all the fuel out. The tank on the bottom has a little bit of rust right around where the filter goes. There, you can kind of see there. It's the best shot of it. So there is a little bit of surface rust there. I'll clean that up as best I can. But here's the fuel that came out of it, guys. Nice orange color, and this is the one that had all of the water in it at the end. Alright, so we'll just take this carb off now, take it over to my bench, open it up, see what it looks like. Okay, so I think what we'll try and do is get this linkage off first for the choke mechanism. And again, guys, just bear with me, because I've never worked on one of these. So this just looks like it's a 90-degree bend, although it doesn't, well, it actually came out the other side. The choke lever here. So that's probably easier anyways. Goes in like that. Okay. Let's put that aside. And next I like to do is open up this sort of bowl here for the fuel shutoff. See what that looks like. Again, it looks like 10 millimeter will do it. Okay, not too bad. Of course, the fuel is bad, right? Kind of matches the fuel was in the tank, and there's not a whole lot of debris down in there. We'll clean that out before we put it back together. Probably just throw that in the ultrasonic cleaner with the rest of it. Let's see what the float bowl here looks like. Oh, look at this. This is quite a bit of water. It's just water right there. I just hope this float bowl is not too rusty. Wow. I'm super psyched about this. Take a look in there. That looks pretty clean. I mean, the float bowl itself doesn't look great. That's pretty much all water. Little bit of gunk at the bottom there, but I've seen way worse. This will clean up pretty good. Super happy about this. Alright. Now to further take it apart. Float pin. And the needle valve underneath with the float. Man, this is looking really promising. I'm liking what I see here. Now I'm going to get the main jet out here. You need yourself a flathead screwdriver. Oh, this one looks like it's a little too big for this one. And you definitely want to push down as you turn, because this is a brass jet and you don't want to strip the head off of that thing. Otherwise you'll be buying yourself a new carburetor. So it doesn't unthread all the way. So inside there you got your main jet and you've got an emulsion tube. Okay, so first off, this emulsion tube, quite a few little holes in this emulsion tube that you have to make sure are cleaned out. You can just use a thin wire or a bread tie or something like that. You poke those out. You can spray it with some carb spray if you don't have a ultrasonic cleaner. Same thing with this main jet. Look at how clean this main jet is. Perfectly clean. You can see right through that guy. So this is very promising. The last thing we got to take off with this thing is the idle circuit, idle jet here. So to get that out, you want to take out your idle screw. Okay, this is to set the idle speed. So this just screws out, and then this guy pops out, and then a third one pops out here as well. Okay, just be careful. Don't. Okay, and then in the end of this guy, this little idle jet, so there's a couple rubber O-rings. There's one here. Looks like it might be missing another one. Usually I see two on here. Then there's a big hole through the center there that draws up fuel through this smaller, there's a smaller hole in there. And you need a really fine piece of wire to stick through there. Here it is. And you can see how that just goes right through. So you can spray that out with a little bit of carb spray as well. Try not to get any on this rubber O-ring because that'll eat away that rubber. If you do spray some in there, then just maybe douse that in a little bit of fuel to get off that carb spray right away. So that's good. This is not going to go in my ultrasonic cleaner, nor is this. It doesn't need to go in there, and nor is that. So I'm just going to put all the metal parts basically in the ultrasonic cleaner. I'm not going to put this rubber tipped needle valve in there. You can see it's kind of held in with a little spring down in there. So to get that off, you kind of have to pull down on that spring as you're pulling that off. This is a slightly better view of it. So you're going to have to pull up on that spring as you move the whole needle valve that way to get it to line up with that hole. And sometimes this can be a little tricky, so just be very careful. You don't fling this spring across the room because you will not be able to find that thing, and this won't work properly next time. So you can maybe use like a little tiny flathead screwdriver. Try and pull that down, the spring. And please don't fly. Please don't fly. Please don't fly. Okay, still didn't work for me. There we go, hopefully. Oh, I think I accidentally pushed it back. So you can see this is a little finicky because I'm trying to be careful too. So now it's in that open slot and it should come out. But again, I don't want this thing to fling across the room. So there you go. That's not going in my ultrasonic cleaner. You can test the float by just shaking it to see if there's any fluid in it. If there is, you're going to need to replace that float because it'll just be flooding your carburetor. Alright, so these small pieces, I'm going to maybe just wipe this down and use a little steel wool to try and clean that up a little bit before I put it in my ultrasonic cleaner. And there we go. Way better. So I didn't figure that was going to take much to clean up. So just going to get this all prepped. Just put the bowl nut in there. Throw everything in here. And I don't need the float pin. And I'll throw the carburetor in my ultrasonic cleaner for about 15 minutes. And just take a little look. There's a little bit of white flaky stuff there. I don't need that to go in there. And I also will take out this rubber O-ring. And that looks in beautiful shape as well. So whoever had this before, definitely I think took care of it pretty good. So I'll throw that in the ultrasonic cleaner and we'll reassemble it and put it back on. Alright, so I got some fresh non-ethanol fuel in this tank here. Spark plugs in. All the carb is hooked up. I don't see any leaks. Actually, I didn't turn the fuel valve on, so let's turn on the fuel valve. And we're going to wait a minute or two for checking out to see if there's any leaks while this float bowl fills up. hopefully we're good there. And then we're going to test out the electric start on this thing. Okay. Yeah, don't see any leaks. So fuel's on, choke. We're going to close the choke, throttle, about 3/4 throttle. Turn the ignition switch on. Let's see if the electric start works first. Alright guys, so it is smoking quite a bit, and I think most of that is because I put a bunch of oil and stuff in the cylinder that's all burning off there, just to try and get it freed up. I did test the augers. They look like they work, but I don't think these ones work, obviously, so I'll get a shear pin for that guy. I'm going to let this thing run for a few minutes. Hopefully the smoking goes away or subsides at least a little bit, but this thing's running well. The tracks are definitely not spinning, so there's something going on there, but I do think hopefully this is the problem. I see a bunch of crap, like someone made a nest underneath where the transmission is right here. So it's already smoking less. The light works. The transmission seems like it wants to work, except something's bogging it down. So I'm gonna flip it up probably on its bucket, and then we're gonna take the belly pan off underneath there and see how bad the nest is underneath there. Alright, I'm going to take this belly pan off. It looks like a bunch of, maybe, these look like 10 millimeter bolts. Looks like we're missing one up here. It might even be, those are 12s, these are 10s. Okay, keep all those together. Let's see what we got going on under here. Ho! All right. Well, I think I'm going to put a mask on, and I'm going to try and clean up all this crap. I think I'm just going to shop vac it out of here. Wow, that's a nice sized nest. Hopefully nobody's in there still. Alright, so I've cleaned out this as best I can. Well, maybe not. Didn't realize there was more junk in here. But anyways, it is way cleaner in here now. And I think we can all decide exactly why this thing will not roll forward or backwards. There's supposed to be rubber on the end of this friction disc or wheel. Okay, so this thing's supposed to slide on this guy right here, All right, this is moving. When we engage the lever up top there, it actually brings those two pieces together, and then it's going to drive the wheels forwards and backwards. Okay, as you can see. So that part of it seems to work. It's just there's no rubber on this disc to be able to make that connection there. So I was afraid of that because I believe I read somewhere online that these friction wheels or friction discs are just not available anymore. So I'm gonna have to do a little searching on my own, see if I can find one, and on eBay or something like that. And so for now, we're gonna have to leave this project at this point. But I mean, it's looking pretty promising as long as I can find a way to get this thing to drive. So I'll get back to you when I find some information about whether or not I can get this part or not. Hey guys, welcome back. It's been maybe about a week or so, and I got a bit of a package here. I had to order some parts. I left you off with not knowing whether or not I'd be able to find parts for this HS80 Honda, but I used a resource that I've bought Honda parts from before. Believe it or not, the name does not indicate that they sell small engine repair stuff, with exception to the fact that a boat engine is a small engine. But boats.net, this is what I've used in the past to purchase Honda parts. During the pandemic, they stopped shipping internationally for a little while, but now they are shipping to Canada. Unfortunately, they've raised the shipping costs since the last time I used them. They used to be pretty cheap, like 10 bucks to ship to Canada, but now, unfortunately, I think this cost me about $27 American to ship this. So what I've got here is a new friction wheel, and they actually do still manufacture friction wheels for these Honda HS50, 55, 70, 80s. I was pretty surprised, but there's the part number for that. I also got myself a new shear pin and shear pin nut, and there's the part on that, and there's the part number on that if you're looking for them. But anyways, I've never changed a friction disc on one of these Honda machines, so I did a little bit of research, and looks like we'll be able to figure it out without too much trouble, hopefully. But I'll take you along on the ride, and we'll see how we make out. All right, guys. So before I flip this up on its service position, which is on the lid there, what I'm gonna do first of all is on this particular machine, and also applicable again to the HS50, 55, 70, and this one in the 80. There is a shaft bolt that has to line up with this sort of service hole right there. That's a 10 millimeter on this one, and I believe it's 12 millimeter on some of the other ones based on my research. We will have to actually take that bolt out to be able to loosen the shaft enough to be able to slide the friction wheel or friction disc off. So to do that, you actually have to put the height adjustment down so that lines up. You have to put the height adjustment, I think it said in the lowest position. I think that's the highest position, so I got to go no, I guess they meant the highest position for the bucket to be off the ground. So now you can see that that lines up. So that's the first step. Next step, I'm going to put it up on its lid. So it's up in its service position now. So first thing we're going to do is on the left side, there is like a sort of a rubber boot sort of dust cap that we're going to have to take off. Probably just use some sort of a, I don't know, paint scraper or something with a wide blade to try and get that off. And also on the other side, of course, there is that, on this one, 10 millimeter bolt. So I'll be taking those two things off next. What I'll do is get a pair of vice grips here, and I'm gonna have to put it on the shaft here. I don't want to wreck the spline of the shaft. It's a sort of a splined shaft, so I'm just going to put a piece of rag around that. So hopefully I don't wreck that. I'm also going to need to do this anyways, because to get these bolts off of the friction disc, it is going to have to not spin either. So let's see what we get here now. Alright, so that's good. That came right off. And then on the other side, just gonna get my putty knife in there and okay, that actually, mine was in pretty decent shape. It's actually quite pliable. There's a little bit of like old grease in there, looks like. All right, so on this side where I removed the rubber boot, you can basically just see the spline shaft. There's no retaining bolt on this side. I'll go around to the other side. It looks like the other end of the shaft. Hopefully this isn't going to create too many issues when I try to move the shaft. Although I feel like I'm going to probably have some issues because the shaft itself is actually a little bit on the rusty side, so we'll have to see how that turns out. So from here, what I'm going to do next is to try and remove these. They look like 10mm bolts off of the old friction disc. All right, so I'm going to put some penetrating I don't know if that's gonna work, but okay. So that's one. Wow. Pretty impressed for the amount of rust that's on here. These things are actually gonna come out. So guys, hopefully this video is going to help somebody. I searched on YouTube there to try and find somebody else doing a friction disc replacement on one of these older Hondas, and I could not find a video. So that's why I'm kind of making this video, trying to help some other people out as well. So there is a snap ring, if you can see that right here, which I'm probably going to try and move over this way a little bit so that I can push this shaft that way and make some space over on this side, just enough space to be able to slide this guy off. So we're gonna see how this works out. All right, so I finally got that snap ring moved over a few inches, so we should be able to hopefully just sort of move this shaft far enough this way that we can slide this off just like that. So alright, that seems to be working. Just need a little persuasion. So now you can see I got quite a bit more space over there. We'll see if this thing will actually just slide right off now. Oh, I didn't want to do that, but that's okay. And there we go, easy enough. So let's compare the two side by side. Make sure first of all the holes line up, which they do. And as you can see, the new one comes with a rubber. That's what causes the friction between this friction plate, which is spinning with the engine, and the wheel. So before I put this back together, since it's a little bit open here, I'm going to actually try and clean up this friction wheel. Alright, now clean this off and just use a little bit of gasoline on a rag here, and it looks way better. Alright, now to put it back on, just the reverse of how it came off, of course. Put that guy on first, and I'm going to try and slide the shaft back through. There we go. Actually, pretty easy there. Get my 3 bolts. Line up the holes, of course. Alright, so let me show you what I'm finding out here. This friction wheel here is just sitting up a little bit too high to be able to line up the holes. Just not giving me enough space with the rubber now on this friction disc. So it just won't line up. So what I found is to get this actually to rotate downwards a little bit. What you need to do is to push up on this whole arm assembly here. And you can see how that kind of, it's hard to tell on the camera, but it is rotating that disc. And the only thing that's holding this arm sort of back this way and preventing us from moving this disc up is this spring. So get yourself a, I don't know, pair of needle nose pliers or whatever. Make sure you got some glasses on anytime you're working with springs. Just try and pull that spring out there. And then that's going to give us enough room to be able to push this lever all the way forward. It'll drop down our friction wheel, and I can put my friction disc on here now, and it lines up with the hub. I just have to line up the holes, and I'll be able to put the bolts back in. There we go. Beauty. There we go. Springs back in place. Now, this shouldn't be rubbing right up against this guy here. Alright guys, so I had to spend maybe 20 minutes to try and figure out this Honda engineering. They tend to over-engineer everything, but they do make good products, so they last forever, obviously. Not forever, but they last a long time if you take good care of them. I had to try and figure out what was going on with this whole assembly here and try and figure out why there was no space in between the disc and the wheel, the friction disc and the friction wheel, because in a neutral position this should not be engaged. It should not be touching at all, right, like it is right now. So previously it was touching at all times, even in the neutral position. So that's not what we want. So I had to try and figure out what was going on with the handle. So it's hard to tell. I'll try and go from the bottom side here, but in this neutral position, which is basically over to the left side. So anything up and down along that left edge there is going to be a neutral position. Okay, so in a neutral position, what we need to have is what I figured out is I needed to have this cable tight. It had to get pulled upwards this way, which when I pull this cable tight and have it going up this way, that actually creates the space that we needed. It actually draws this disc down a little bit through this mechanism, this arm. All right, it actually applies when I have that cable pulled all the way up this way. It pulls this arm. It pulls this arm and rotates this shaft, which then this is directly linked. The wheel is directly linked to this shaft here. So it rotates kind of up and down like this a little bit with that tension on that cable, which pulls this arm. Okay, so what I needed to do is increase the tension on that cable so that it would pull this down while it was in the neutral position. So to do that, I actually had to adjust this cable right here, which is the one I was talking about, to put more tension on it. So I had to actually pull this off, and I actually loosened these two bolts, or these nuts I should say, and then I pulled the whole assembly off, and then these nuts were actually further down on this shaft. So what I ended up doing is I drove them this way, which actually puts more tension on that cable when it's in a neutral position, and therefore that's the adjustment I needed to make to get this thing to not be engaged all the time. So if you're having this problem, that's the cable you want to be adjusting right there. I think I'm just about ready to button it up now. And what I'm going to do actually is just one last time, just run a rag with some gasoline on the disc and the wheel, because I don't want to have any grease on either of those mating surfaces. But before I do that, I'm probably going to grease up this shaft a little bit, just with some low temp grease, and then clean all that up, and then I'll put the pan back on. I'll flip it back over, and we'll be ready to test drive this thing finally. Alright, so she's plugged in. There's no prime. Fuel's on. Choke is on. Throttle is up. And let's see what happens. Ignition switch on. So I do have to, I forgot I do have to actually add the shear pin that's been busted off there. But I mean, this thing runs like a top. All the gears are working now. Super stoked about this. So let me just finish up with this shear pin and show you how to do that. Alright, to replace the shear pin on this thing, it's as easy as just kind of lining up the hole in the auger with the hole on the shaft. Alright, I found the hole. It looks like our old shear pin is smashed right off in there. So you're going to have to get yourself a punch and a hammer. Try and get this thing out. There we go. Okay, so there's the old part of the shear pin. And now you can see the hole straight through there. So it's literally just a matter of lining up the auger. As long as you got the right shear pin, it should go straight through. I'll put it in through this side here. Actually, I can't do that because this side has a smaller hole than this side, and there's basically a shank here, or what do you want to call that? Not a shank, a shoulder. So it needs to go in just like that. All right, and it looks like on this side there is a lock washer. This does look hard to say. I don't think this is actually a lock nut, although it does look like it. I don't see any nylon in there for sure, but anyways, I'm going to try and find myself a lock washer there, and then we're going to put that on, tighten it up, and we'll be good to go. Alright, I found a little lock washer there. And you're going to need a 14 millimeter and a 12 millimeter to tighten this guy up. Sorry, a 14 and a 10. So 14 and a 10. Tighten that up. Alright. I'm just going to snug it up. And there we go. Now it's all going to spin as one and shear off if this thing gets jammed up in some ice or a frozen newspaper or something. So, alright guys, I think that's it for me. I appreciate you joining me on this journey. I'm going to get the belt cover back on. But other than that, and get the air filter cover back on. The non-air filter cover, but hopefully you guys enjoyed me wrenching on this thing, and if you got one of these old bad boys, then maybe it's going to help you out. So thanks again for joining me, and until our next project, take care.